Good night. Again, tonight being Friday, your host and chairman for the program tonight, and we will deal with some constitutional and legal matters. Our platform, that is to have mercy upon us, to nourish our hearts, our desires, even our most secret thoughts, loving Father. Please continue to bless our family members, each and every one of them, as if they were being mentioned by name and number. We pray that those may continue to positive public benefit to our people and leadership, as well as that thou would bless this country of the United States, its people and leadership, and all the rest of humanity, loving Father, especially those people who have need of food and clothes and shelter, those who are in harm's way, who are being killed, sometimes for no justifiable reason. We pray that thou mayest help those who are in tornadoes, those who are in hurricanes and flooding, as well as those who are in uh, earthquakes and volcano eruptions and all manner of his mercies in Jesus' name. Amen. I'll just, and let me see where I'm going to find my scripture for tonight. Judges. Let's see. Job. I'll go to the book of Job. And I will read, let's see. I'll go ahead and read Job chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. And it goes as follows. Call now, if there be any that will answer thee. Unto which of the saints wilt thou turn? For wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slaveth the silly one. Verse 3 goes as follows. I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I cursed his habitation. And that is our reading for tonight. Job chapter 5, verse 1, 2, and 3. Let me put this where it belongs. Tonight's program will be dealing partially with the vexing issue in our country in regards to the 13th proposed amendment, which apparently the government is intent on pushing down the throat of the people with or without the acquiescence of the people. That is to say, they continue to act in a rogue manner. They're not acting as a government and acting in the best interest of the people and following the laws of the country, which they're trained to do. We have a constitution, but our current operators are operating as if that constitution will violate it right, left, and center, and they do so with impunity at that, is to afford the government an opportunity to redeem themselves violations, constitutional overreach, and malignant conduct on the part of police officers who are supposed to have the constitution that they're supposed to abide by, because they're also, besides being peace officers, they are also officers of the court and officers of the state, empowered by the state to arrest people who commit crime and to afford those people an opportunity to present themselves to a court to be adjudicated for the crimes that they are alleged to have committed, and therefore needs to be pronounced as either guilty or innocent. And our constitution says that anyone that is alleged to have committed a crime or is believed to be committing or intending to commit a crime must pay perceived as innocent until proven guilty or until the person confesses his guilt. And that proven guilty means that they must be taken to a court of jurisdiction and must be adjudged by a competent, honorable, and honest judge who has judicial, who has proper judicial temperament and who abides by the judicial code of ethics. Because, as have been proven recently, we do have judges who do not abide by those codes, who violate those codes and sit on the bench and lie while they are in charge of proceedings in the court, and then turn around and are being caught on tape, not videotape, but electronic tape, stipulating things that were not truth or truthful, for which then, for all intents and purposes, they are caught suborning the powers of the court and basically allowing themselves to come into disrepute, dispossess some people in the community of their basic civil rights from doing, except under a state of emergency whereby the government then has to show that it legitimately has a state of emergency in order to temporarily be granted the privilege to defer people's basic civil rights. But has been found by courts in the past, and as we have told them in the past for a few years now, that those state of emergency that they were implementing were highly irregular, they were illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional, because they did not meet the threshold of the Constitution requires for them to be able to justifiably have the privilege accorded to them, because it's a privilege that is accorded to the government to be able to derogate people's basic civil rights and constitutional enshrined rights. It's not something that they can do willy-nilly or just out of the back pocket. One day they decide they will pull a little something out of the back pocket and decide to go ahead and abrogate people's basic civil rights, or just throw an SOE over the society or any part of the society that they so choose to. It has to have merits. Such merits have to be extreme. You have to have a catastrophe in order to justify an SOE. But these jackals are now attempting to and wanting to exculpate themselves from the crimes that they commit during the course of the SOE. That is, to take on extra powers, judicial powers unto themselves, that they can violate people's rights and have no consequence, or no one can come to the court and challenge it. That is to say, they want to pick up people on the streets and send them into custody, to jail, to be locked up for 30 days at a time and probably up to 6 months. And in one extreme instance, the commissioner of police currently stipulated that he would like to ask his boss to afford them the privilege of doing that up to a year. I think the man is losing his marbles. He's drunk with power. And I may say probably ignorant of the fact that he is actually speaking to constitutional matters without the knowledge required to be able to speak, adequately. But even at that point, even if he is ignorant of those realities or those facts or the law itself that he is supposed to be operating under, his boss is a lawyer. So how can he convince his boss, who is the lawyer, to commit a crime against the Constitution? when that very same lawyer had advocated in the past that those actions were unconstitutional. Is it now that he's getting a little older, maybe he's trying to blame that on senility? Because he knew what the right thing was before, a few years back, the hair on his head. Those gray hair apparently are way more. But is inclined to accept his subordinate, the chief of police, by the way, and who apparently, based on what he's expounding, to go and commit crime. The 13th Amendment is authority to police department that has already been to deal with any consequences because of those wrongdoings that they were doing. It was done in the past that was illegal, is now deemed to be legal against them for that. That's what this law is intimating. Officers will have that which should have been under a true emergency situation for them to do lawful work, not to do unlawful work. The fact that they are given the power is not to stop crimes from being committed by others. They should not be the ones committing crime. Police work and bastardize SOEs to exculpate themselves and to say, okay, well, based on the SOE, they just want to target a few elements that are gang related, according to them, that are being blamed for some of the crimes. They are acting as a worse gang because they're using powers of state to commit crimes under the color of law. They go out there and they arrest or harass just about anybody, and if people talk about what they're doing or say something to them or complain about how they're mistreating people, then they want to charge the people in for additional offenses. That is not a lawful society of law. It's the basis of our constitution. And I'm in the read them out from the as the constitution attempting to do contrary to the constitution. And most of the people in the country have, in some instances, for those who should be well informed, they're actually ill informed, and they want to believe that that's the way it's supposed to be. Let me read what it says. Okay, before I do the reading, let me just do the citations for a general overview. The first is section 2 of the Constitution of Belizean, which deals with the supremacy of the Constitution. Is the supreme law of the land. Deals with equality under the law, which is to say, and for that matter, whether citizen or not, are equality. Public emergency, personal, particular 13th Amendment is intended to grossly violate. And they're saying that they need this 13th Amendment to help them fight crime, when the state is already empowered with a lot of crime fighting laws and other tools and abilities, which they refuse to use. Why? Because they want to hold the public hostage to this idea that only by them throwing an SOE blanket over the whole society can they then deal with crime. And they have been doing this for many years, and they have not solved the crime. Nor are they actually having a reasonable success at prosecution, with less than 5% success in prosecution, which means that they are not doing their proper investigation, which means that they are not securing the files in the police department, from where many of the documents get disappeared. But they want to blame the general public for their shortcomings. Okay? So people that have nothing to do with the gangs, people that have nothing to do with any criminal activity, have to be subjected to a state of emergency status, under which many of them end up with police record, because the police brutalize them and they complain about the brutalization, and then they get charged with false charges in order to silence them. That's what you call a police state. And anytime you have a state where it's classified as a police state because of the conduct, social dastardly conduct of the police officers, unchecked, misbehaving themselves and hurting people, you get to a state where people turn around and try to take the law into their hands, such as having the previous police commissioner house being shut up and having other police officers being shot and killed, or others being stabbed, or people take the law into their hand when there's no recourse. But the people in politics and the politicians, they could care less, because as far as they're concerned, it is not reaching their level. Part 1 of the Constitution of Belize, and I'll read section 2 as I previously offered. And it reads as follows. Subsection 1 of Section 2, subsection 1 reads as follows. This Constitution is the supreme law of Belize. And if any other law, when it refers to other law, it is not referring to the very same Constitution itself. It's referring to other law that the legislator is empowered to make. But in making those laws, there are criteria and requirements for them to make a law that is constitutional, and then there are criteria and regulation that determines whether or not some of those laws that they make are unconstitutional or not valid. Why? Because they are made outside the bounds of the Constitution. They violate the Constitution. So let me finish reading. This Constitution is the supreme law of Belize, and if any other law is inconsistent with this Constitution, that other law, as I previously stipulated, which is made by the legislative, or any other protocols or procedures or management decrees, it says if any other law is inconsistent with the Constitution, then that other law shall, comma, to the extent of its inconsistency, comma, be void. So the legislator can make a million different laws if they want to. That's what they're supposed to do, make laws. But they're not supposed to be making just about any kind of wishy-washy law or any kind of law that derogates from people's basic civil rights, or that is unconstitutional, or that is violative of the Constitution. Because right here it tells you, if any other law is inconsistent with this Constitution, that other law, to the extent of its inconsistencies, is void. So it behooves the legislators to make proper law, constitutional law, law that falls within the boundaries of the Constitution. But rather, they go ahead and make unconstitutional laws, and when the laws get to the Supreme Court or the Appellate Court or the final court of jurisdiction in the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, those other laws are struck down. At that level, people get hurt by it and then have to sue those who can, and then take it through all those different levels of court sessions for it to be struck down. It should not be made. It's lawyers, some of them that are putting these basic structures of the Constitution, which are non-violative and should not be violated or cannot be written out of existence. The separation of powers doctrine. Most lawyers are supposed to know these things. They are basic tenets of legal practice. They are part of the fundamental teachings that they teach them when they go to law school. Because if they really have that knowledge, but we have the current Attorney General of the country. That's the 13th Amendment. A few years ago, he won one of the most important cases in relation to human government abrogating people's basic civil rights and things like those. And back then, that few years ago, he was so eloquent in how he spoke about his successful case, that it was such a great case because government was trying to abuse his client's right. And he was so eloquent, which means that the man damn well knew from back then that the craziness that he's now getting a few dollars more to is not one and the same. It's contradictory. And if he knew what the truth was back then, and if the court upheld his submissions back then and let him win his case back then, how the devil is he going to come now and advocate just the opposite because he's a part of the government now, getting a little higher salary, having a little bit more prestige and power to his name? And because these laws that he's now trying to talk about and push are not going to affect him, that he can afford to just be dismissive enough of the Constitution and pretend that, if it affects somebody else, so what? That's a lack of moral. That's a lack of professionalism. You can't argue both sides of the same case. That is improper. As a lawyer, you can argue one side on behalf of your client, but you cannot argue both sides of the case on behalf of both clients. After reading that part, which was Section 2, Subsection 1, as regards to clarifying what the supremacy of the law is and why is it stated as such in the Constitution, I hope people understand that particular point, okay? So the legislature is empowered to make laws that falls within the constraint. Whenever they make a law that goes outside the constraints of the acting as scofflaws, they are upholding a law that is not valid, viable, legal, or lawful. And those things happen a lot of time all over the world, that the lawmaker, they go ahead and make bastardized laws. The problem is, in Belize, we have, and these laws are targeted at poorer part of the society who have no money to fight, and on whose behalf the Attorney General should be looking out for preserving their and protecting these people's rights under the Constitution. He's not there only as the Attorney General and looking out for the interest of the government alone. If the government is doing something that is wrong, it is the proper advice of the Attorney General to tell the government that such conduct is anti-constitutional or is wrong, not because he's getting paid by the government that he should want to do what the officials in the government wants him to do that is illegal. Because if what they're asking him to do is illegal, then he's acting as an illegal. He's using the capacity and the powers vested in his office to act illegal. I'd like to go to Section 6 of the Constitution. Just spare me a second so I could leave from Section 2 that I was just now and go to Section 6, 5. I'll be there right now. Section 6, just a minute. Okay. And Section 6 of the Constitution of Belize, let me see, let me get there before okay, I got it. Section 6 of the Constitution of Belize, under subsection 1, reads as follows. all persons are equal before the law and are equal with, without any discrimination to the equal protection of the law, and are entitled without any discrimination to the equal protection of the law. So when you have a government coming to you, the general public, as in this particular case in Belize, and proposing to violate your constitutional rights, and particularly on this 13th Amendment, classifying certain people in the society and certain parts of the society as being less than the other members that are not so classified. What they're doing is not affording equality under the law. They're basically discriminating for whatever reason, whether justified or not. They're discriminating. And when you are discriminating under Section 6, you're falling afoul of the Constitution. You're derogating people's rights and you're violative of the Constitution. So then you can't come and say you want to create an amendment to the Constitution to justify you or to legalize your illegal behavior. That on its face, is a travesty. Just the idea that somebody would contemplate such a behavior, not just trying to put it into action and to use those amended portion to trump the Constitution itself. And then you want to do it retroactively. Okay? You, the government, committed crime under the color of law, and then now you want to tell us you should not be held accountable. In other words, then you shouldn't be holding accountable nobody under the law. No criminal should be held culpable for their laws. They should be afforded the same privilege that the government wants to take now, that is to, having committed the crime, wants to be excused from it. Give all criminals the same leeway in the law. How stupid that would be. So it's intolerable to have a government come to the public when the Constitution says that if they're going to come to you to ask for them to get the powers to derogate your rights, first of all, they got to comply with the requirements. That is that they shall have a referendum, during the course of which you will decide on the basis of that referendum whether or not you want to grant them that power that is vested in you, because those powers are reserved powers vested in the public, vested in the plebiscite, vested in the people of the country, who are actually the real government of the country, instead of these knucklehead scoundrels who are just trying to, let me back up a little bit. I'm getting a little flustered. I need to keep the program clean, clear, concise, and at the same time, try to deliver the message, in a graceful way. I'm trying to be graceful. I hope I can. I succeed. I'm not guaranteeing that. As dealing with this kind of matters, the way these people are behaving, it's very aggravating. It's challenging. I'll read subsection 2 of section 6, which reads as follows. If any person is charged with a criminal offense, then, unless the charge is withdrawn, the case shall be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial court established by law. That is what is required currently under our Constitution. But I bet you Belizeans at home and abroad may not know that there are people sitting in our jails who have been arrested for crimes and are sitting in jail for more than 10 years, some of them, without having had a hearing, despite what the Constitution says, which I just read just now, right? I'll read it again, just for the fun of so doing. Section 6, subsection 2 reads as follows. If any person is charged with a criminal offense, then, unless the charge is withdrawn, the case shall be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by an independent and impartial court established by law. We have those courts currently established by law, and yet these people are sitting in jail for some of them for months, years, and I would say even in one case more than a decade. We just had a case that was thrown out just recently. I think the judge threw out the case because the people were not prosecuted and they were held in jail for almost 15 years. That's crazy on the face of it. Why? Because these people are not following the Constitution. And I'm definitely sure that the lawyers for those defendants whose case was recently thrown out, by the way, there was evidence, there was everything required to have a proper case and to have had that case been completed before that period of time, instead of having to throw the whole thing out because they had spent so much time already in jail and their case was not properly taken care of. That's a failure of governance. I could go on to read other parts of this, and there are many other parts of that same section there, different subsections, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a lot of reading. 10, subsection 10 of that same section, subsection 11, subsection 12, okay? And each of those subsections have additional paragraphs attached to them in terms of the amount of material then that I would have been reading to cover the whole of that particular section. I'm just trying to give you a perspective as to what is it that this 13th Amendment is intending for, okay? And it amounts no good as regards to a governance or a government that should be operating in the best interest and for the well-being of its people. Now they would say, well, they need the 13th Amendment because they want to be able to fight the gangs. Okay? So in order to fight the gangs, they want to penalize and brutalize and expose the whole communities where those gangs live or reside, or people who they claim, because they could deem somebody or claim that somebody is a member of a gang without any proof and still hold them in jail for a long period of time. They don't do their investigation and then do their arrest based on their investigation. They deem a person what they want to deem that person to be. And just by assuming that posture of being able to deem somebody to be what they in their mind think that this person ought to be deemed to be, then that person gets to suffer whatever rot they can bring down on that person because that person is deemed to be what they say that that person is. That's not how a lawful society operates. That's not a society of laws. That's a society of arbitrary and capricious conduct. And like I said, some of these people are sitting down in jail for years. And then many years after they are let out, either they're not prosecuted. Why? The evidence gets disappeared out of the police department's files. How the hell that's going to happen? If you have a proper police department operating with checks and balances. Why? Some of the same drug dealers, they go and they pay off police officers to disappear documentations. And then when they take these cases to the DPP, and the DPP look at the documents presented to her, She realized that there's not enough evidence to prosecute these individuals and bring to a final conclusion of guilt. So she declares a no prosecutor status. That is that the persons, they must be let loose. But then, by then, those people have been sitting in jail. They have lost their jobs, those who were working. They now have a police record that is not expunged. Their families had to go without their support during the time that they were in jail, sitting down. And a lot of times, some of these arrests that are made, and some of these deeming that they deem people to be this or that or whatever, or some of these charges that they levy on some of these people are bogus in the first instance. They use the police authority and they commit mischievous acts, such as the instance that we saw on the television the other day, where a gentleman went to the police department on his own accord to go and inquire about some information. And the female police officer is going to look on the gentleman and say, well, you're not going to leave this police station. We're going to lock you up overnight. And as a matter of fact, we're going to charge you for offending a police officer. And all this kind of craziness they carry on with. They use the powers and authority vested in them and commit crimes against civilians. We saw the other time when this other officer, he was pistol whipping the guy. Okay? I think the guy was already handcuffed. And he was there pistol whipping the guy. What kind of madness is that? What kind of lawful conduct is that? And because that police officer was related to a high-ranking person, nothing should have come out of that. The Internal Affairs Department of the police did not allow that police officer to suffer any major consequences for such egregious conduct. Nor was that police officer taken to court, put on remand, and charged for his criminal conduct. And those are the kind of behavior that allows other officers to see that kind of thing happen, and they go ahead and do the same thing. The other day, we saw 3 police officers tackling one guy. One of them have his hand around the gentleman's throat, trying to choke him out to try and have him pass out. While the other 2 were grabbing him and they were beating up on the guy. They're not judge, jury, and executioner all in one. You're supposed to use the necessary force in order to arrest the person that is the criminal, or that you're intending to go and levy a lawful charge on, because the person has broken the law. But nobody empowers a police officer to go and behave as judge, jury, and executioner on the streets. That's not a lawful society. Now, if the police officer is meeting some resistance from his function as an officer, only a fool will then resist a police officer who is conducting himself. The more you resist or against a police officer so as not to be arrested, the more violence then the officer is then justified without provocation or without need, and just arbitrarily and capriciously brutalize members of the society. That's untenable. And anybody conducting themselves in that manner ought to be brought to account, because in the first place, they're disgracing the police standards of conduct. They're disgracing the whole police department, because that is not the way a lawful police department operates. I'd like to go ahead and read subsection 11 of the Constitution of Belize. Let me see. Okay, let me go to number 11. Please just bear a couple of seconds. More with me. 10. I'm almost there now. So a little more. Okay, there we go. Section 11. Protection of freedom of conscience. Constitution of Belize, Part 2, Section 11, subsection 1 reads as follows. It says, except with his own consent, a person shall not be hindered in the enjoyment of his freedom of conscience, including freedom of thought. Oh man. Just a second. Just please bear me a second. I touch the screen, and then whenever I touch the screen, normally it just brings up additional data, and some of that data was covering what I was supposed to be reading, so I had to stop. I couldn't continue reading on. Let me take another stab at it now. Except with his own consent, a person shall not be hindered in the enjoyment of his freedom of conscience. That's a mandate from the Constitution, okay? Including freedom of thought and of religion. Freedom to change his religion or beliefs, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and both in public and in private, to manifest and propagate his religion or belief in worship, teaching, practice, and observance, except with his own. Just a second. Subsection 2 reads as follows: except with his own consent, or if he is a person under the age of 18 years, the consent of his parents or guardian, a person attending any place of education, detained in any prison or corrective institution, or serving a naval or military or air force shall not be required to receive religious instructions or to take part in or attend any religious ceremony or observations if that institution, ceremony, or observance relate to a religion, is not of his own. That is to say that the government is precluded from tampering with any of these rights or privilege that people are supposed to be accorded, because according to the Constitution, those are part of your fundamental rights. I'll go ahead and read Section 16 of the Constitution of Belize. If you speak, oops, man, I did it wrong. I need to go to 16, but okay, that's 12. That's 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. There we go, 16. Section 16, subsection 1 reads as follows: subject to the provisions of subsection 4, 5, and 7 of this section, no law shall make any provisions that is discriminatory either of itself or in its effect. So if the legislators are going to go and make a law that is discriminative in itself or in its effect, the mere factor or the mere fact that that law is discriminative means that it's violative of the Constitution and of someone's fundamental rights. Therefore, it is for the court to deem that that law is null and void, unconstitutional, and is illegal as well as unlawful. So anybody operating under this particular 13th Amendment that they're trying to make would be in violation of this particular section of the Constitution, Section 16, subsection 1. So even after they go ahead and make this law, which they should make it, as we're trying to point out, based on the breaches of the Constitution, if they make it and the matter gets to the point where somebody have the opportunity to challenge it, the court should be able to rule it as null and void, even if all 100% of the legislators get together and make it. Why? It's null and void. It's violative of the Constitution. You cannot make a law that is violating the Constitution, other than if you're going to overthrow the Constitution, and create a new Constitution. But the fundamental principles of the Constitution, as stipulated under the separation of powers and under the basic structure doctrines, says that the legislator cannot legislate away the fundamental rights of the people. Those are rights that are vested in the people. Those are what you call reserved rights. They're not vested in the government. And it says specifically, as I'm reading here in these various sections of the Constitution under part 2, because under part 2 is where our fundamental rights are found. In section 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 19. And the powers vested in the court under judicial review, section 20, as well as section 94 and 95, as a matter of fact, to guarantee that the government does not transgress those rights. And the court have what is called unlimited jurisdiction to hear and rule on any case that is brought before it by anyone that believes that his rights have been tampered with, have been derogated, that he believe or she believe that her rights would be derogated. They can come for judicial review and redress to the courts. At least that's the way we are taught it ought to be. Until now, we're finding out that some of the new judges that are being brought into the country under contract are now ruling according to needs and the wants of the government rather than according to law. Why? Because these judges don't want to have any problems with the government since they come in under contract. They don't want to fall afoul of the government. So therefore, they are ending up pulling our system, ruling according to the wishes of the government rather than ruling according to law, and they are destroying our society of law and order. They are making rulings that is contrary to established law and to establish previous rulings, which are what you call this stare decisis or settled law. They are now making rulings that does not comport, with what is required of them. I'll leave that point because that's another point that we'll take up at some other time and flesh out a little bit more in detail, because I'm agree that that is the case, or it's turning out to be the case, because it ought not to. Our country has independence 40 odd years, almost 50 years, okay? And by now we should be mature, or more mature than we had been in the past, but instead we are going backwards, I'll read subsection 2 of that section 16, which says as follows: subject to the provisions of section 6, 7, and 8 of this section, which is section 16, no person shall be treated in a discriminatory manner by any person or authority. And yet, Amendment number 13, which is to say the police officers can misbehave and do all manner of evil against the members of the society, and by virtue of the written legislation that they're trying to incorporate into our Constitution with the intent for those new amendments to override the existing Constitution, which according to the existing Constitution says that that is not supposed to happen because it's violative. But if they can to make it override the Constitution and keep to do police work, legal officers go out there and misbehave, and then you are having a law to say that they are misbehaving. Whatever is it that they decide to do out there, you're deeming that it is legal. When in fact, the very law, which means that it is illegal. If it's illegal and unconstitutional and unlawful, how can you then turn around and say you can hide behind that? Because you don't want to be pulled into court and pay no money, which in the bottom line is that when these lawmakers make these laws and the harm is committed and the redress is to make sure that those people get compensated, somehow or another we should have a law too that says, okay, well, if they decide to go ahead and violate the Constitution and make unconstitutional law, then their pocket should feel. They should have some consequence to their misbehavior, especially if they have been told ahead of time. And even without having to tell them, they should know as lawyers that they are committing a crime. So then they are committing a wanton crime. It's not a crime by omission or a crime by, by an oversight. It's a wanton crime. They are deliberately committing a crime. So they should suffer some personal consequences. And I bet you that we'd end up not having to even have these kind of discussions, because then the law will be made the way it's supposed to be made, because that's what we are paying them for. We're not paying them to be jackals and hyenas and scofflaws that make laws against the interests of the public and to end up hurting the public just because they feel like they're not going to get hurt or suffer no consequences. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Anyhow, I'll go on to section 18. Yeah, I'll just skip the rest of section 16 and go to, because there are different parts of 16 as well. There's subsection 1, subsection 2, subsection 3, subsection 4, subsection 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 other sections in there with other additional paragraphs as well. And because we have a 1.5 hour show, which is 90 minutes basically, there's no way that we have a copy of their own constitution. When we're having this part, they could look into what is it I'm reading. And then when the program is finished, they could probably continue on and do additional review and research on their own to flesh out other parts out. Some of these other sections and subsections that could be could be helpful. Let me continue forward. Okay. So we're going to talk under section 18 of the Constitution of Belize. We're going to talk about provisions for persons for periods of public emergency, which is what they're claiming that they want to have this Amendment 13 address. That is that instead of the police go out there and arrest people who are committing crimes, they claim that they know who these people are. Not only do they claim that they know who they are, they have what you call I think it's an LIU or something like that. I think that's what they call it, which comprises most of the senior gang members them that they are targeting, or that they say are the big boys, and police officials and other independent non-profit organizational people, specialists who are trying to mediate some of the violence that they're talking about. And they're paying these guys a salary to try and discourage them from having to be involved in nefarious activities such as robberies and other things so that they can feel gainfully employed. Now, these are the people who control the small foot soldiers them on the street, right, that goes out and commit some of the crimes. Okay? These are the people that the government is entering into negotiating with and sponsoring and providing support for. But that support can extend far enough to pick up some of the other youths them that are in the society who have no jobs, or there's not enough economics being circled in the country to the point where the government can afford to pay some of these other lower level crime individual criminal. I don't like using the term criminals, because a lot of these people that the government targets and some of them that the police arrest have nothing to do with criminal activities. Some of them just live in a neighborhood. In every neighborhood, you're going to have people who, some are deleterious type-minded people, people who are, human beings are prone to criminal conduct. And it is only those who feel like they don't want to be caught up in the criminal system that generally try to behave correctly or act correctly. They are deterred from criminal conduct by the basis of not wanting to be tainted with a criminal paintbrush. But all human beings are capable of being a criminal. Just like, but the reality is that all kinds. We're not all the same. In fact, some of the worst criminals who are committing more crimes against the society in terms of the reason why there's not enough funds to run the government and to do some of the things that needs to be done is because the white collar criminals them are stealing millions of dollars. But the people that the legal system and the police system targets are the little small guys that's stealing a bread to go and feed a kid, or stealing a couple eggs, or steal, petty criminals, they call it. Because when they steal big, as in the case of the white collars, they don't bother them. I have yet to see in Belize, we are serious criminals that are ripping off, like I said, millions of dollars from the government treasury. And as a matter of fact, I'll go a little further. I have yet to see one of the politicians them going to jail for becoming millionaires out of the public coffers after they win an election. They're not even tried, much less convicted and sent to jail. Okay? Let me just proceed to read section 18 as I was intending to just now. I think I have to make an apology from my way of doing things. That is that every time I have these discussions or these presentations, I have a tendency of getting worked up, and I hope that people put up with me or tolerate me with it, because to deal with these kind of matters is not easy, and they're emotional. There are issues that affect your emotion. Okay, and all I'm trying to do right here now is to, or when I make this presentation, is to control my emotion, because I'm just like anybody else as a human being. Some of this stuff pissed me off. Okay, because there's no reason for it to be like that. Nobody is saying to the government, don't arrest the criminals. Okay, that's not what I'm advocating or saying. So I hope that's not the interpretation of any, I would say, wrong-minded people. would tend to attribute to my efforts, because it wouldn't be right, it wouldn't be fair, it wouldn't be correct. I'm saying to the government and the police department, use the power of state and the powers vested in the police department to go out there and arrest the criminals. That's what your job is. That's what you're being paid for. Don't negotiate with the criminals and then go and harass the rest of the society because you're failing at doing police work or doing proper investigative work, or failing at keeping your files then from being compromised within your own police department. You have no right to make any such 13th Amendment craziness to victimize members of the society when you have the police authority to arrest people and put them under remand to be prosecuted, and to then send them for further remand for additional jail time. As a matter of fact, part of our problem is that we know the cracking of necks. That's why the criminals then get so bold and bold-faced. The reason why we know the crack their necks is because a lot of people don't want the system be so tough to the point where somebody who is innocent can get a neck crack as well. So in order not to crack one wrong neck, with a spare one lot of others, a few hundred of them, who need to be disposed of from the society. They don't want to live in a society and be law-abiding members of the society. They need to be ostracized and or disposed of. But a few people can't hold the whole rest of the society hostage. Now, that is my personal perspective. But that's not what you hear me advocating here. What you hear me advocating here is holding fidelity to the Constitution and being lawful, despite the fact that these people who are committing crimes have no such thoughts and ideas like what I'm proposing, or not proposing, but advocating. Some of them are hardcore criminals. They'll kill today, and they'll kill tomorrow, and they'll kill the following day. And as far as they're concerned, until they're killed, they'll just continue doing what they do and feel all right doing. I'm saying to the police department, stop encouraging, aiding and abetting the criminal conducts and the criminal behavior, and then turn around and take your vengeance out of lawful members of the society. You cannot violate the Constitution to create an unconstitutional law that empowers you to say, okay, well, whatever you do is deemed right, even if it's criminal. That's not lawful. Do your job. Do your investigation. Go out there and arrest who needs to be arrested and put them in jail. Stop grabbing up people that have nothing to do with criminality and turn them into criminals by deeming them criminal and giving them a bogus charge, and for them to end up with a record, and they can't get a job, they can't take care of themselves, much less take care of any family members. And you're not doing that across the board. You're deliberately doing that as a way of marginalizing the Black community, which is the biggest problem that most people are pretending not to be paying attention to or recognizing is the reality. But at the end of the day, whether you want to be racist or not, the fact is that the Constitution is there to protect every citizen. I did not read the 18. I said I was going to read it, and I went on again to wanting to apologize for my, getting emotional and getting vexed and pointing out some of the wrong things that they're doing in order to explain what is it that I'm trying to advocate. Okay? Was it public emergency 18? I was at 18. I need to go to 18. Okay, so I'm back at 18 now. I hope I don't lose it again. So let me start reading before I end up losing it. Section 18 of the Constitution of Belize and subsection 1 reads as follows. In this part, period of public emergency means any period during which, for example, under paragraph A, during which Belize is engaged in any war. Okay? That would constitute a justifiable reason for casting a state of emergency over the country or a part of the country or a part of the society, wherever those actions are going on in terms of a war. But in this particular case, as in paragraph A, the first one that I read, it's making reference to a war as in the country of Belize being invaded by a neighboring or foreign country and or Belize invading some other country. Okay, that's what it's referring to. I'll read it over again. In this part 18, subsection section 18, subsection 1, it says, in this part, in quotation, period of public emergency means any period during which, as in paragraph A, as I read before, I'm going to read again. Paragraph A, Belize is engaged in any war. And another criteria could be, for example, or as in B, if there is in force a proclamation by the Governor General declaring that a state of public emergency exists. As also in paragraph C, where it says, there is in force a resolution of the National Assembly declaring that democratic institutions in Belize are threatened by subversion. And what it's referring to there is in the case, for example, where the democratic institutions refer to, like, for example, the government, right? Or the police department, or any other government institution, right, under our democracy, is being threatened from internal or subversive groups or organizations. Okay? Now, what is referring to there is that, for example, if a group of people get together and decide to overthrow the government internally, right? Remember that under paragraph A, we spoke about a war, right? By external forces. This paragraph C is referring to a war or insurgency against the government, that the government would then have the right to ask for a declaration of emergency, right? The House of Assembly can pass a resolution and it can be taken to the Governor General for ascension. So if Belize, any democratic institution in Belize are threatened by subversion, and that's what, specifically it's referring to there in that section. It says, under paragraph, under subsection 2, it reads, the Governor General may, by proclamation, which shall be published in the Gazette, the Governor General may declare that a state of public emergency exists for the purpose of that part. And I thought they already stipulated that in my comments. There are some other clarifications here. Let me see. It says, section 3A. It says, a proclamation made by the Governor General under subsection 2 above of this section shall not be effective unless it contains a declaration that the Governor General is satisfied that the following conditions have been met, for example, which is why we were able to tell them for years now when they were making those bogus unconstitutional SOE, these are some of the things that we were trying to bring to their attention. Not that we should have had to, because like I said, the government cabinet had many lawyers in there, and in general, they have the Attorney General's office, they have the Solicitor General's office, they have, private legal office that they employ or that they contract. So all these different entities should have been able to afford them the possibility of them knowing ahead of time, like we knew and were telling them. The very same thing we were telling them that the judge eventually had to tell them. That they were violating the Constitution. But I don't think that they had to be told. Because they knew from the very first time they decided to make those bastardized things, they were anti-constitutional. They were violating the Constitution. They just went ahead and violated it because who's to bring them to account? Who's going to cause any problems to them, that they won't have a regret over? They don't regret the fact that the government have to pay all these penalties or charges or settlements to these people that they harm, that the government harm. But if some of this money was coming out of their pocket, they would think twice about breaking the law, and they'll be deterred somewhat. Because I don't think that they really want to hurt these people if they are going to get hurt themselves. They don't mind if those people get hurt so long as they don't get hurt. That's what it's all about. I needed to read a little bit more about Section 18 because, like I said, it specifies some criteria, that the government needs to meet and they don't meet, and they still go to the Governor General under false pretext and ask the Governor General to assent these unconstitutional behavior of theirs. It says, as in the first instance in paragraph A of this section, it says that a state of war, the Governor General must be convinced that a state of war between Belize and another state is imminent, or that a public emergency has arisen as a result of the occurrence of any earthquake, for example, hurricane, flood, major catastrophic fire, outbreak of pestilence, outbreak of infectious diseases, or other similar catastrophic or calamity. Or, as in paragraph B, that actions has been taken or is imminently threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and as so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety or to deprive the community or any substantial portions of the community of supplies or services essential to life. That is to say, if let's say, for example, when they call gang, right? One of these days, one of them gang decide, okay, well, you know what? They hold up customs and they now make no goods come in at the country and they hold customs hostage. That's what the Constitution is talking about when it says a public emergency. And it goes on to clarify it right here. These kind of actions or outcomes constitute a justifiable reason to institute or to request a public emergency status. because the Constitution says in this particular paragraph here, by any persons or body of persons, they are trying to say, well, that could be one person, and they could claim that there's one person that they know that is intent on committing harm to the public, so therefore they want to throw an SOU over the whole society. Instead of go hard and go arrest that one person, they currently have the powers to do that. They don't have to create an inconvenience to the whole society to put them all under the police storm, to brutalize them and do things to them that the people don't have a redress for or cannot come back and sue the police department for. The government have the power right now to go and arrest any one person or group of people that, in fact, under the SOE, what they call the SOE, which are bogus and illegal, by the way, because they didn't do them right. They didn't meet the threshold as I'm reading them. These thresholds that are in the Constitution are what they're supposed to meet before they go to the Governor General and ask for an ascension. Okay? But I don't know if the Governor General even know what her job is, or how to make sure that she don't get bamboozled by these scofflaws that take these unconstitutional things for her to sign off on. And she signs off on them. Why? Because the very same Attorney General is her legal advisor. And the Attorney General is working for the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. And the Governor General doesn't have a constitutional office of advisors of her own. So she have to depend on the very Attorney General that is hoodwinking her to encourage her to sign off on stuff that does not meet constitutional muster. That is not according to how the Constitution says it here. I'm getting to the point of having to close the show within a few minutes from now, and I still have section 19 that I want to go to. I want us to read a little bit more of 18, but I think I'll have to forego that. We'll have other opportunities to come back and deal with those, because besides this Amendment 13 that we're talking about tonight, and all these violations that Amendment 13 will be doing, that these lawyers and the government know should not be done, and because they have a supermajority, they're going to push it through, pretending that a supermajority is more than 100%. 100% is the majority. And if the Constitution says that even if you have the 100% make a bastardized law or violate the Constitution, other law, that other law, as in the case of this Amendment 13, is null and void, even before you make it, based on the basis for which you're making it, and the laws that you're going to be violating if you get it made, and if it gets implemented. I'm not saying that unconstitutional laws cannot be implemented, but the government and we, the people, suffer the consequence of that implementation of a bogus law or an unconstitutional law. When people get the opportunity to sue, and then the government have to pay, and we, the people of the country, have to come up with the taxes or the money to afford the government the opportunity to be able to settle those payments. Because it's not the ministers that take money out of their pocket and settle those payments. As the Prime Minister indicated, and as we all know, it's the people that will pay. So they don't they don't care. In the first place, they should not be making unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional law, is my point. I'll try and jump to, in the interest of the last few minutes that I have left, I have about 3 more minutes left, so I'll probably end up taking about 5 to just read over on section 19 here. Let me jump to section 19 quickly, because time is going. So I'm going to skip subsection 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can see that that particular section 18 had 10 subsections and a lot of other paragraphs in addition to those subsections. So you can readily see that, as I mentioned earlier, if I try to read out all these different parts that that comes under those headings that I'm dealing with, I'm almost at the end of my program, and I would not have had enough time. So I calculated correctly that I would not have had the time to do all of that. So therefore, I didn't do it. And I'm going to try and use the last couple of minutes left now quickly to read section 19 of the Constitution of Belize. It says, when a person is detained by virtue of, let me see if I can, I got to make it smaller because otherwise I'm going to get into trouble. Got to make it a little smaller now. Okay, I hope that's good enough. Section 19 of the Constitution of Belize, under Part 2, subsection 1 reads as follows. When a person is detained by virtue of a law, that authority taking, I'm sorry. Oh man, I gotta make this a lot smaller. Oh man, I didn't realize. Too much. Okay, so I hope I can read it. I'll just read it over again, please, just for context, because I was reading it, but part of it was covered up at the device. Okay, so and the length of the page horizontally was being truncated. Let me just go ahead and read because the time is running off. Section 19, subsection 1 reads as follows. When a person is detained by virtue of the law that authorized the taking during a period of public emergency, for example, and why they like to use the public emergencies because they will get away doing wrong things and have no consequence to be had for the wrong things, right? So when a person is taken during a period of public emergency of measures that are reasonably justifiable for the purpose of dealing with the situation that exists in Belize, because remember I told you a situation of emergency has to exist, valid emergency and provable emergency before they go on a general signs off on it in order for them to go out then and exercise those powers, right? To grab people and arrest people based on that particular emergency declaration. With the situation that exists in Belize during the period, the following provisions shall apply. That is to say, he or she shall, with reasonable promptitude, and in any case, not more than 7 days after the commencement of his detention or the detention of the person, whether it's a he or she, the person must be informed in a language that he or she understands of the grounds upon which he or she is detained, and furnished with a written statement in English specifying the particular of those grounds. Now, how onerous are these people that they are unwilling to abide by this constitutional prescripts or requirement here? Very straightforward, very simple, and very easy. You have, under the public emergency, for example, they still have to give people within 7 days then charge sheet, telling them in a language that the person understands what are the crimes that they violated, what the state of emergency stipulates as regards to that particular violation, and they got to afford them the privilege to go to a court within the 7 days time. Well, at least 14 days in some instances. But these jackals are trying to abolish what the Constitution requires here under a state of emergency, and make this 13th Amendment of the state of emergency be so much more onerous that they don't have to do none of this. They can brutalize people and grab people and arrest people and carry them up to Hattieville and throw them in jail and leave them there for a few months if they need to or want to, or if they don't have the time or they don't care to. And because they're under a state of emergency, as they're saying in this particular Amendment 13, once they deem something to be the way it is deemed, then to hell with the Constitution, to hell with your basic rights, and you know, and whatever wrong they're doing is deemed to be right because they deem the wrong to be right. That's what the 13th Amendment is saying. So after you allow these jackals to put that kind of amendment over your head and they use it on you, you don't have a recourse, nothing to get to court. Even your lawyer can't visit you up in Hattieville there. I don't understand how we Belize people are so dotish. And I'll say, I mean, if I must be derogatory, some of them are actually stupid because some of them, they don't even know if you read or write. But then when I agree to have something like this put over their head and get themselves bashed in and have their society all messed up because of a few con artists who are a bunch of scoundrels who are only ripping off the treasury and trying to get whatever they can out of the system so that when they retire from politics, they retire with enough money so that they don't have to go work nowhere else. That's what's happening to our country. And the people that these things are going to be affecting the most are the ones that are actually, for all intents and purposes, are the ones that are going along with this program and agreeing to say, well, okay, well, if the government said that so, if the government said that's the way they want to do it, well, so let them do it because they are the government. They fail to understand the kind of mindset people that we're dealing with, a bunch of nefarious, evil-minded people. But I have already went beyond my time. I'm at 34 now, 4 minutes behind, and I'll take the next minute. Well, not even a minute. I'm at 35 right now, so I need to close. Belizeans at home and abroad. I had one more that I needed to read, but like I said, I'm out of time, so I'll just say thank you for your time and patience and attention. I hope whatever I said tonight or did tonight may accrue to some public benefit to you and spur you or encourage you or prompt you into looking into these matters a little bit more seriously. As a matter of fact, the time that the government gave for comments and or for people to say something about this particular issue was, I think, the 31st, which was yesterday. So all I could say is wish you well, wish you luck. Get on your knees. Those of you who are in harm's way, and even some of you who don't think that you're in harm's way, because once this stuff is made into a law, people are going to get hurt, and those who don't have the means to afford a legal defense will languish in jail, suffer major consequences until this matter can be taken to court for judicial review and get struck down, because it will be struck down. That much is a certain. When it's going to get struck down is the issue. And even when it gets struck down, for example, we have seen recently where these guys are losing these cases in court. And instead of going to the higher courts for further review or clarification, they're turning around and making more onerous laws so that they don't have to even have the court involved in terms of how the court should decide these things. They're trying to create laws to determine that the court has no jurisdiction, or to take away the court's original jurisdiction, which the Constitution grants the court under the separation of powers. They're turning around and making these bastardized laws, and you, the people, are sitting down there sucking your finger. I wish you well. That's all I could say for right now. I pray for you guys as well. Good night, Belizeans at home and abroad. Thank you very much for your time spared, and I hope that you have derived some positive public benefit from tonight's 327th program of the Belizean Affairs show. Good night. God bless. Belizeans at home and abroad always.